A look outside the Beltway at Oklahoma City, where they mark 22 years since the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. Republican lawmakers are facing tough crowds at town halls back home during their two-week recess, and some have distanced themselves from President Trump. Joining us now from Oklahoma City, Senator James Lankford, who this week called on the president to release his tax returns. Senator, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Glad to be with you, Chris.
Let's start big picture. You were not a fan of this president during the campaign, although you did support him. How do you think he's done in these first 100 days?
You know, he's tried to lay out a lot of his agenda and try to be able to get as much as he can move legislatively. I heard Mick Mulvaney earlier talk about the regulatory issues. We've actually done more congressional review acts than any other time, any presidency in that. We've done about 15 of those so far. There was one total over the decades in the past, and getting Neil Gorsuch on board in the Supreme Court is incredibly significant. Obviously, there were some fumbles out of the gate with trying to deal with the executive order on immigration and trying to get the language right, pulling it back, trying to go back again. Some of those things and some other statements, they're getting their feet under the ground. I think personally the biggest issue they've got is to get their staff together. There's still a lot of undersecretaries they've got to be able to nominate and be able to put in place so we can get those finished up and get all their team together.
You made some news this week after the White House really basically made it clear the president doesn't intend to ever release his tax returns. Take a look at that.
Is it time just to say once and for all the president is never going to release his tax returns?
We'll have to get back to you on that.
You said the president should keep his promise and release his returns. Why does that matter, especially at a time when it is beginning this week, the government is going to begin to consider tax reform?
Right. I just don't have an issue with anyone if they, in the campaign time period, they say, yes, I'm going to do it. I promise to do that. We'll take care of that. We'll go through an audit to then say the American people expect you to fulfill your word and to be able to do that. I don't see that as an issue. Now, the president has legally done everything he's required to do with the financial disclosures, and I do not in any way think that Congress should step in and compel that with some piece of legislation. I just think the president should be able to keep his word and to be able to move on. And this will be a distraction to his presidency all the way through that he can settle it.
Do you think it's important that he do it if you're going to talk about changing loopholes, deductions, lowering rates, that people see how that would affect the president?
No, I really don't. I think the bigger issue is he said he was going to do it during the campaign time period. He has the power to be able to do that, and he should go ahead and follow through on that. It's nothing more than trying to be able to say, follow through on what you said you were going to do, and so the American people can just move on.
You were also skeptical this week about the Obamacare repeal and replace bill that the president and House Republicans are trying to push through the House this week. Here you were at a town hall meeting in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma this week.
The bill they put out initially, part of the reason it failed is they covered twice as many people with half as much help. So people on the lower end did not have enough subsidy to be able to cover them anymore. That's a problem.
Senator, what's your concern with what's being discussed now, and what do you think about this push? And Director Mulvaney didn't back off it today to try to get this through the House this week before the first 100 days.
No, I think it's a terrific idea to get through the House during the first 100 days. If that's possible to be able to get it finished, we can move it over to the Senate. We can take a look at it, try to get it done, and then get it to the president's desk. That'd be terrific. My biggest issue, of several issues, is how do we deal with the cost increases for those folks that are right now at 400% of poverty and up. They have dramatic cost increases. In my state in Oklahoma, on the individual market, the rates went up last year 76% for those individuals in the individual market. In addition to that, we have one insurance carrier in the state. So President Obama's promise of an exchange that brought competition has obviously failed, and trying to bring rates down has failed dramatically in my state. So we've got to be able to deal with the cost aspects, but we've also got to be able to deal with that safety net. When the original House plan came out, it expanded the subsidies from 400% of poverty to 850% of poverty, but cut down the amount significantly. So basically people at 800% of poverty that have no subsidies now would get new subsidies, but those folks on the lower end would get much less. That's not reasonable to me to say if we're going to have it, let's keep it at the same amount that the Affordable Care Act had, and by all means, let's not double the amount of subsidies that are going to the number of people that are out there. Let's keep it to where it was, at least at that spot, to be able to fulfill that promise that those that are on it now and have coverage now would still continue to have that protection in the days ahead, but not expand it.
Given your concern about the safety net, what's your reaction to Director Mulvaney of the administration using as a bargaining bargaining chip, these cost savings reductions, the idea of subsidies that help get insurance coverage for the lower income people?
So they're in the process of budget negotiations. Obviously, they're trying to put everything out they want to be able to put out in the White House. It's a part of the give and the take of the entire budget process. My biggest frustration on it, Chris, is that we're at this point again, period. We have, since the Budget Act was passed in 1974, there's been 4 times since 1974 we've actually gotten it done correctly and on time as the law was written. Now, as you know well, there's no president's budget that's ever been signed into law. So the things that are the president's budget are out there become the baseline for the argument, but they don't actually become law. But we have a real issue in the process of budgeting and how we do it. We're never going to get another product until we fix the process. There's a group of us in the Senate that have been pushing hard to change the way we do budgeting so we can actually get this done right and not have these cliffs all the time.
Let's talk about what seems to be a greater willingness among some Republicans in Congress, yourself included, to criticize this president. There are a dozen of you who have said the president should keep his promise and release his tax returns. There are some Republican senators and congressmen in border states who are really questioning whether or not you need a full border wall. And I want to play for you Senator Joni Ernst at a town hall meeting this week in Iowa. Here she is.
With the trips to Florida, I do wish that he would spend more time in Washington, D.C. That's what we have the White House for.
Senator, what's going on with this increased willingness of Republican members of Congress, including yourself, to criticize this president?
I think, quite frankly, it's what Republicans said we would do a few years ago when people challenged us and said, if you had someone in the White House of your own party, would you hold them to account the same way that you're holding President Obama account? You're finding out that's actually true, that Republicans are consistent to go both ways in this. Now, listen, in the town hall meetings that I've had in the last 2 weeks, and I've had 16 of them, in the town hall meetings that I've had in the last 2 weeks, I've heard some of the same argument, just with an opposite. Now people are saying they demand to see Trump's tax returns. 3 years ago, it's people saying they demand to see President Obama's birth certificate. 3 years ago, people were saying President Obama's traveling all the time, playing golf, and he's played more golf than any other president in history. Now I have progressive constituents saying that President Trump is out there traveling to Mar-a-Lago, and how much are his costs on it? So these same type of arguments are coming up back and forth, but I think what you're finding is Republicans are being consistent. They are playing it straight to say, if there's an issue, let's raise the issue regardless of who's in the White House, and to be able to help solve the issues that we've got. So I don't see that as inconsistent for us.
There are new polls out today, particularly one in the Washington Post, that show that this president, at this point, 100 days in, has the lowest approval rating of any post-war president. When you combine that with these very tightly contested special elections in red states like Kansas and Georgia, yes, the Republicans, well, they won in Kansas. In Georgia, there's going to be a runoff. Do you worry at all about the 2018 midterms and Republican prospects?
I think it's very early to worry about the 2018 prospects. I think there's a long way to go. I do think we'll get health care done in the next couple of months. We have to, again, with the rates that are going up so dramatically, we've got to be able to deal with that. I do think we'll get tax reform done. I do think we'll deal with the budget issues. We have to deal with $500 billion of overspending just this year. You start to actually get a lot of these things done. I think the American people can say it's messy, it's noisy. The language wasn't always artful in the process. The tweets at 1 a.m. weren't always my favorite, but we're actually getting things done. We're making progress. The American people were extremely frustrated. I think the international community was frustrated that the previous administration seemed to be sitting still, and it seemed to be gridlocked, not getting anything done. If we can prove we can get things done, I think the American people will say, great, at least we're getting things done and we're moving.
A couple of questions I'm going to ask you to put on your other hat as a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee. As you know, an American citizen was taken prisoner today in Pyongyang in North Korea, and coincidentally, you had been talking to the administration about trying to set up a new policy for how to deal with Americans who are detained by the North Koreans. Any suggestions as to what they should do?
I have, actually. That is our third American that's currently being held by the North Koreans right now. So it's not just an issue about how do we deal with the issue of the North Koreans, but it's trying to get a policy in place for all people that are either prisoners of conscience or just Americans, period. We don't have a clear policy across the entire federal government about how we handle American prisoners, what the process will be on the ground, region to region. So it's kind of an ad hoc process as we go through it. I do think we need a clear policy, and that we need to put up again the clear statement from America America that it seemed to be President Obama took down, that we wouldn't negotiate for people that were being held prisoner by another country, especially a state sponsor of terrorism. So we've got to be able to have those clear guidelines back out there again. And again, North Korea, for no reason, is holding another American, trying to have some sort of bargaining chip. And they show what an irrational international player they really are.
Finally, and I got less than a minute left, as a member of Senate Intelligence, are we any closer to getting an answer on whether there was any collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign on the election, and whether or not there was any improper surveillance by the Obama administration of Mr. Trump and his associates?
No, Chris, we're closer every day on that. We go through a lot of documents. We go through interviews. We're going through all that process, but we are doing it in quiet. I heard many people say the Senate Intelligence Committee just started. We actually started more than 5 months ago in this process. We just work in quiet through things that are like this. We're handling sensitive documents and source documents that we're not going to get out, but we are continuing on that with multiple meetings and lots of research every single week. So yes, we are moving closer, but we're doing it the right way, and we're going to go where the facts go. That'll be the consistent part of it for us, because at the end of it, we got to put out a report the American people can look at and trust.
Senator Lankford, thank you. Thanks for joining us this Sunday.
Thank you.
Up next, we'll bring in our